Becoming Yourself with Dr Maev Conneely, Episode 4. This podcast brings together wisdom and tools from coaching, clinical psychology, and mental health research to help you become who you want to be. So today's episode is about your past and your future, and who you've been in the past and who you can be in the future. So I want to ask you a question. How do you decide what is possible for your future? And do you think that who you are in the future can be different to who you've been in the past? I guess in another way I'm asking, can people change? Which is this big question that people ask each other and themselves often in moments of desperation. Oh my God, why am I like this? Why have I done this again? And I think a lot of people would say, people don't change, you can't change. You know, the way you've been in the past is the way you're going to be in the future, within, some small variations. I think that there's something there that is really dangerous for it, that completely stops progress from happening within our lives and across people, across the world. If you think that the only things that are possible for you in the future are things that are kind of expectable and realistic based on what's happened in the past. With that way of thinking, no big shifts in how society works would take place. We wouldn't do wild things like putting a man on the moon, and we wouldn't change the kind of status quo of how things are and kind of challenge and change and rectify oppressive systems. I wouldn't give women the vote or have women working. And so there's something there about the kind of risk in thinking about how the past and the future are related, that maybe on a societal level we can see that it doesn't make sense to be limited and so strongly influenced by what's happened in the past. But then in our lives, we think it's being very realistic and rational and wise to look at what we've been able to do in the past and then base our future and the dreams we have for the future on what we've already done and what is kind of, realistic. I think that there's something there in the word realistic that you can hide behind that and actually end up using what's realistic as a way of chaining yourself up and holding yourself back, especially if you're not even aware that those chains are there. If you just think, you haven't even realized that you have these sort of blinkers or these limitations on what is possible. I'm going to try and make this a little bit less abstract. So if we're talking about, I think there are two main categories of things you might not consider possible for your future self. So the first is things like in your circumstances, like it might not be possible for me to have that type of job or run my own business or have a house or be in a happy marriage, or whatever kind of external things you could have that you might not be realizing are just not possible for you. You think they're possible in general, but not for you. And then the second category that's even more sneaky, because we really might not realize that there are other ways, other possibilities. The second category is ways of feeling. So you might not be able to imagine for the future that you could feel differently about your work, that you could feel differently about doing housework, or feel differently about yourself and your worth and maybe your body, your relationship with food, relationship with people around you. You might not be able to imagine looking forward to a party when at the moment thinking of parties, it fills you with anxiety. So there are those two categories, kind of objective things you could obtain in your life and the way you think about things in your life and feel about things in your life that could be completely different. But at the moment you can't imagine it because you don't think it's possible, because it seems either unrealistic or irrational for things to be so different in the future to how they've been in the past. And so that might be what you're thinking now, is that, you know, you can't possibly let go of the past completely like that. How could you set a goal to run your own business when you've no experience with that at all? You know, you've no degree in business, you've never sold anything, you've never done the thing that you want to turn into a business. You might think it's completely, you know, irrational and wild to even suggest that as an option for you to try to dream about or try to have as a goal. And I guess I'm going to push back on that and say that loads of big steps forward happen when we have no evidence for them working. You know, new businesses get set up, and, you know, big successful businesses where we always imagined it had to be done a certain way. You know, you had to send emails and not Facebook messages, or, you know, that you have to kind of call a taxi rather than have an app to get an Uber. And there was no evidence for that working, for that new way, that new service working in the world. And all of us have this in our lives or all of us that have learned to walk anyway, with learning to walk, that when you're a little toddler, well, I guess not a toddler yet, when you're a baby and you're taking your first steps, you have no evidence that is going to work out. It's a completely wild thing to do. You didn't know that was going to be something you'd learn how to do. And there had to be an element of kind of delusional faith in this outcome of being able to walk for you to take that first wobbly step and then fall over and then drag yourself back up, or be dragged back up by a stressed parent. And we've kind of forgotten that a lot of us live our lives thinking that we can't have that type of faith if we can't see the steps, if we don't understand exactly how we're going to get to the stage where we can walk and run around easily. Then it's completely irrational for us to imagine and to set that as a goal. But that isn't necessarily true, and there are lots of that way of thinking is keeping your life smaller than it needs to be, and cutting off options for you, that you just won't even see what the options could be if you're without even if a bunch of things are impossible. And so not questioning what is possible means you definitely can't achieve it for the first instance, because you're not even trying. You're just sort of saying it can't be. There's no way I could ever have that job or earn that much money or do that type of work that I find both fulfilling and that is lucrative, for example. Or I could never heal my relationship with food and my body. It's always been like this in the past, so how could it possibly be different in the future? And if you kind of aren't willing to consider the options, to consider the possibility of this future being possible, then you can't see the options either. You can't see the ways of getting there. They're completely cut off. There's no space there for your mind to start solving a problem if you're not even willing to set it up as a potential problem that you want to address. Basically, what I'm saying is that the way you've been in the past does not have to be the way you are in the future. And the reason we often recreate the past and end up, the only reason that the past could influence the future is because right now in this moment, you're telling yourself a story that it has to be this way. So a big thing for me with this was I really believed it was a true kind of careful analysis of my character, that I wasn't able to produce work unless it was 2 a.m. and the deadline was, at 9 a.m. the next morning, and I was in a caffeine fueled craze of stress trying to produce an essay. Like, I really thought that that's just how I get my best ideas. I'm not really able to make myself do the work beforehand. That's just what I'm like because I'm chaotic or something. So I had some story there that I really thought was true. I thought it was really accurate, and that it was unchangeable. That's what I'd been like in the past, and like I'd tried to not do that and I'd failed. So that's what I was going to be like in the future. And I was for a long time completely unwilling to sort of question that. And it took questioning it slightly, leaving a sort of the option that I might be wrong about that it might be possible to do work before the deadline, that maybe my best ideas don't necessarily come at 2 a.m. Maybe I'm wrong about that, for other options to become possible. So in my case, what I did is I thought about what I would feel and think when I was working at 2 a.m. and how come I thought that those were the moments when I had these brilliant ideas. And what I found out, and I think this is extremely common, is that I was a little bit less hard on myself when it was 2 a.m. and I was able to separate the work I was producing from my worth as a human being, because I was saying, oh, well, look, it's 2 a.m. It's really not ideal circumstances. This will have to do. This will have to be good enough. And I would manage to get words down on the paper, in the Word document, and move on to actually have an essay written. But in the middle of the day, at a time where it's normal to work, I would think things like, this isn't good enough and I have to start again, and that doesn't make sense. And I'd be very critical and destructive of my work to the extent that I wasn't actually able to produce a sentence without kind of deleting it again and second guessing every word. And because I was making each word and the essay as a whole a sort of, referendum on my worth as a human being. But that whole kind of realization that took ages of kind of unpacking assumptions wouldn't have been possible if I weren't first willing to question this sort of idea that, I have to work at 2 a.m. and that's when I do my best work. If I believed that that's how I would have to be forevermore, it's wild to think how limited my options for life would be. It'd be very difficult to have a job where I'm working in the office with other people, which is something I love doing. And it would mean I would have to, have antisocial hours. It would mean I'd have to cancel plans at the last minute to get things done because the deadline would sort of dictate everything else in my life. And there's a kind of an initial being willing to question the idea that what you've been like in the past is not what you have to be like in the future. An idea that really helped me in conceptualizing this and letting go of how you've been in the past is that the past is completely over and done and completely unalterable, in the same way that ancient Rome is in the past and it's unalterable what happened, and it doesn't have to impact my today. So how I decide to spend my time today is not impacted at all. It is completely uninfluenced by Caesar being stabbed by Brutus. But then what I did yesterday, to me, seems like it does affect what I do today. And if I mess something up yesterday, I have to drag that into today. If I miss a train yesterday, I have to have this belief that I am a disorganized person who misses trains, or if I was unkind to myself yesterday and was stressed yesterday, that has to mean something about what I'm like today. And actually it doesn't. It doesn't have to. You can let who you were and what you did yesterday be as much in the past and as unalterable and separate as ancient Rome is. I think it sounds a bit delusional or wild to say that. But it is true, you just can't change what happened yesterday. But you can change what happens tomorrow if you're willing to not make yesterday mean something about you or about who you have to be. And so, I just encourage you to think about what you believe is possible for yourself and what you believe is impossible. Do you think it's not possible to have a job that you love and that means you earn enough money to live the life you want? Or maybe you think it's not possible for you to ever enjoy exercise. Or maybe it's not possible for you to be at a party and drink in moderation, or to enjoy drinking in moderation, or to not even want to drink, to not be interested in it. Could you imagine feeling very differently about this area of your life to how you feel now? I think let yourself really imagine something that you desperately want, but that usually when you dream it, some little voice in your head says, oh, but that's completely unrealistic. That can't be possible. And before you let your brain come up with all of the reasons it's unrealistic, see if you can hold on to the possibility for long enough just to let it percolate in your mind and see what other options come up. If you did believe it was possible to have a loving relationship with your body and with food, what might that look like? And what, if that were really possible, how might that person behave? How might that person think and feel? So there's this really cool line in a TV program called The Outlaws. It's this scene with Stephen Merchant, who plays a character called Greg, and Eleanor Tomlinson, who plays a character called Gabby. And Greg is saying, "Ugh, if only I could be the type of bloke who jumps out of planes. If I could be that kind of guy, I would have this wonderful life. I would be in a happy marriage, and everything would be better and wonderful." And so this bloke who jumps out of planes is, represents this whole way of living that's kind of more thrilling or exciting or shiny and wonderful. And Lady Gabby replies, oh my God, get over yourself. The only way you become a guy who jumps out of planes is by jumping out of planes. Those guys are only the people who jump out of planes because that's what they did. And that's what they do. And that's how you become that person, which sounds on one level really silly. But in another way, it kind of cuts through our complicated excuses of what's realistic and what's possible for us and who we are in the past and what that means about who we have to be going forward. If you want to be the kind of person who's jumping out of planes, you jump out of planes. And it doesn't have to be more complicated. And so I really like that as a sort of a way of thinking about who you want to be and imagining impossible things that actually might be possible if you're willing to imagine them long enough to see the end goal. And then if you see where you want to get to, if you believe, even though you might not be sure how you're going to get there, let's say with walking, you're not sure exactly how it's going to happen that you're going to be able to walk or going to be able to run. But if you're willing to believe that you can get there, the first step might become visible. It might be possible to take one step and another step. I think a big reason we aren't willing to imagine things that are impossible or to kind of consider things as possibilities is in case we then try to do it and mess up, or try to do it and mess up and then are really mean to ourselves. But what if we decided now that we could mess up and that would be a useful information gathering exercise? What if you decided, I'm not sure how to do this, but I really want to give it a go and I think that it could be possible for me. What if you decided now that you aren't going to be really mean to yourself if you mess up, if you don't manage, if you try and it doesn't work out? what possibilities would you be able to consider? And I think there's something really powerful in just having the options. You might then not want to go after them. You might not want to change anything. But you can't even be making the decision if you don't think it's possible, if you're out of hand dismissing a whole way of possibly living, or a whole kind of, I don't know, area of life that you might really want, but you're not fully admitting to yourself. So that is the episode for this week. Please get in touch if you have any thoughts or feedback, and you can find out more about my work on my website, which is drmaevconneely.com, and on my Instagram, which is also drmaevconneely.com. Or no, there's no .com on the Instagram. Anyway, thank you for listening. Bye.